Hello, ladies. I'm Mrs. Jeff Wurgis, and we just heard from Mrs. Phil Mabee, our president. I want to welcome you today on May 8th, 1933, to our very first meeting of the Oxford Garden Club. The Great Depression has certainly been worrisome, so perhaps we ladies can find some pleasure in gardening to take our minds off these days. Wow, look how gussied up everyone is. Well, many of you have already been a part of our Michigan State University Extension Group, the Goldie Girls Sewing Club, but we decided we like gardening more than sewing. So thanks to the Romeo Garden Club for helping us get started. We are delighted that all 25 charter members are here today. You certainly do represent the businesses of Oxford. We have the wives of the owners of Price Drugstore, Blashill Jewelers, the Oxford Opera House and Theater, Whitcomb Mabley Funeral Home, the Oxford Cement Tile Factory, Marshall Brothers Grocery Store, Bowers Department Store, Superior Auto Sales, and Unger Flowers. Also represented are the wives of the owners and publishers of the Oxford Leader, including Mrs. Glaspie, who has a street named after them. Our local dentists and doctors and veterinarian are represented in the garden club, as well as prominent farmers and landowners in the area. What a prestigious group of ladies we have assembled for this club. Oh, also the sheriff's wife. I almost forgot that. Now, we have agreed that the object of the club shall be to stimulate the knowledge and love of gardening among amateurs, to aid in the protection of native trees, plants and birds, and to encourage civic planting. Our meetings will be held every other Monday from 2 to 3:30 in our members' homes from March to October. Membership is limited to 25 women, and prospective members may apply as openings occur, and the club will vote on whether or not to be accepted. And it will be in the minutes what the vote will be. Luckily, no one was denied that I could see. Dues will be 50 cents a year. How many got that one right? We have many wonderful field trips to take. We will see the Grosse Pointe Gardens and the Detroit Flower Show, and we'll travel there by the Detroit Interurban Rail, which has a station right here in Oxford. So we don't even have to drive, ladies. Well, many of you may have already signed up to be on the program committee, and if you don't know what your responsibilities are, here they are. The program committee will select a topic for each meeting, and one person will present it to the club. Topics may include weeds in the garden, varieties of iris, flowers of the Bible, blooming vines, and of course our favorite topic, flower arranging. Members may do their research at the library or use one of the garden magazines that they receive each month. And the programs will be very exciting, I'm sure. When roll is called to determine whether you are present or not, please respond with an answer associated with our topic. For instance, name your greatest weed enemy would be appropriate for the topic of weeds, your favorite iris, vines we should like to grow, or quotations of plants mentioned in the Bible, or what is your favorite garden catalog. Our meetings are held in our homes with the hostess providing light refreshments. We did so enjoy the green corn coffee today and tea. Looking back on this decade of the 30s, we have accomplished many things. The grandest, of course, is the annual flower show, which began in 1935, which is the rage among all the communities. Oxford High School has graciously allowed us to use the auditorium, as we have invited many garden clubs in the area to attend or display their own arrangements in our show. The flower show has been a tremendous success with 371 guests from 20 different towns the second year we held it. And by 1938, we had over 1,000 guests and 700 entries. We made $22.54 profit on the show, which helped pay for the night watchman at $1.50 a night. And of course, our members do visit the garden flower shows that are held by our neighboring communities like Holly, Leonard, Dryden, Rochester. Mrs. Nettie Smith suggested we begin each meeting with the Garden Club Creed read in unison, and we have done so at each meeting. In 1937, we voted to allow Lake Orion women to attend the meetings, and in 1936, we voted to march in the homecoming parade, the Oxford Homecoming Parade. In 1936, there were 4 nominees for president for the following year, and it took 5 ballots to finally elect the president. Isn't it wonderful to have so many ladies who want to lead this prestigious group? Since our members were also sewers, a decision was made to make a quilt to raffle at one of our flower shows to raise money. Since the raffle is considered a game of chance, gambling, we gave a penny packet of seeds to each person who bought a ticket to get around that. In 1938, petunias were named as the Oxford flower, and we were all encouraged to plant them in their gardens. The Oxford Garden Club became so popular that by 1939, the maximum membership was raised to 35 members. We had a successful start to our garden club, but wait and see what the 1940s accomplished. Paula Allison is going to talk to you about the 1940s.
I don't know if everybody can see this. They're Victory Gardens. Victory Gardens. The garden trend continued during World War II when the official Victory Garden program launched in 1941. By 1944, Americans were growing 20 million Victory Gardens, also known as war gardens or food gardens for defense. Victory Gardens were grown in nearly every spare patch of land, in private gardens, public lands, parks, playgrounds, rooftops, and churchyards. Even window boxes and front step containers became useful spots for citizens to grow their own food. This is when Victory Garden really took off, producing 40% of the fruit and vegetables consumed in the U.S. So Victory Gardens, I thought it was pretty fascinating when I was researching for this decade. We were growing food to support the troops. And as you can see in some of these postcards, it was a pretty vibrant thing to do, and they really promoted it, and so did our garden club. So that was just kind of what was going on a little bit in the 40s. So in 1940, our garden club prosperity was beginning as the country left the Depression, World War II began, and people were asked to help with war efforts. Meanwhile, the Oxford Garden Flower Show flourished each year. Inspirational poems, songs, patriotic songs, and prayers at each meeting. Meetings were held at members' home and were well attended by 25 to 40 members. Meetings continued every other Monday, March through October. Most meetings began with roll call, similar to this. Jackie Netzloff? No. She would respond with the tree. Pat Petit? Red bud. And so on. So that's how they did their roll call. Let's see. Sorry. And then they also did, they did poems. So here I have a poem that might have been read during one of the meetings. To serve my country day by day at any humble post I may, to honor and respect her flag, to live the traits of which I brag, to be American indeed, as well as in my printed creed, to stand for truth and honest toil, to till my little patch of soil, and to keep in mind the debt I owe to them who died I might know. My country prosperous and treat and pass the heritage to me. And then they would do little ditties like, ho, 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 your row, do it every day. It makes your figure slender grow, and slithe you will stay. And a big part of the meetings that were in people's homes, members' homes, were the flower arrangement. They were really, really big parts of the meeting. And they were described in the minutes. So I did this flower arrangement, and this would be, thank you, this would be some type of, in the minutes, it would be a garden spray bookend by pink snapdragons and burgundy alstroemeria. Sweet William, hot pink roses, and chartreuse Fujimums added texture, all focusing on a vibrant cluster of yellow daisies as a focal point. Hostilise, ostrich fern, and a bit of painted lady framed the display, all being held by a crisp white ceramic vessel. So that would be similar to what was in the minutes. And some of the meetings in the minutes, there were several descriptions of flowers and where they were located in the person's home. Some meetings were held at the Oxford Theater to show pictures of recent trips by members, kind of similar to what we still do today. In 1941, the movement for beautification of Oxford was begun. Oxford Garden Club planted petunias along Washington Street to Drainer. Petunias was the official flower of Oxford. Fundraising for petunias included bake sales, tag sales, yard sales, flower sales in the park. Rose Gem, Violet Gem, or Rosy Mum were the favorites. Oxford Greenhouse sold petunias to Oxford Garden Club for 35 cents a dozen. Village donated $25 to the Oxford Garden Club for the petunias to plant for planting. In 1942, Flowers Show featured the Victory Garden Harvest and the patriotic theme. So in 1940, the Victory Gardens were pretty big topic for the club, along with, it seemed like everywhere. It really did. It was a way that us civilians at home could support our troops abroad. And I guess most of the food that we were growing here in the United States was being shipped overseas for our troops. And that's where the Oxford or the Victory Gardens kind of came from, which I did not know. I thought it was very interesting. I heard of Victory Gardens before, but just wasn't sure why, what they were all about. We did have field trips to Ferry Seed Farm in Rochester. Not very many would attend because of gas rationings. And then Mount Clemens had tulip gardens. Program would consist of Miss Olive Proel presented a flower arranging. Miss Gillespie spoke on canning, preserving, pressure cook and water baths, preparing vegetables for freezing, storage for the Victory Garden products for winter by stretching wartime dollars. Members were urged to volunteer for blood banks. Lord Prayer followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and God Bless America. In 1945 to 46, the club donated a memorial for boys who lost their life in World War II by planting a ginkgo tree in the park. Tea and cookies were served, followed by meetings from lace-covered tables with retiring presidents. Mrs. Intha Hubble was pouring. I don't know what she was pouring, but she was pouring. Probably, yeah. More programs on spraying for pests with chemicals as they became more available after the war. Fundraisers selling greeting cards for $1 a box. Letters from the Federated Garden Club stated that Oxford Garden Club was a recognized member. And in 1949, the dues were raised to $1 a year. And minutes were printed in the Oxford Leader. So I did call the Oxford Leader to see if I could get any minutes, and they are all archived at the Oxford Library now. So that was it.
Can you hold up your
Oh, my wood flower?
your arrangement?
Sure.
So pretty. It's great that you did that according to what was in the minutes for the 40s.
Yes.
I wondered why you chose what you did, and you explained that very well.
Yeah, let me get
Thank
that
you.
on. Okay. Thank you, Paula. Oh, you're Kathy Connolly. You can announce it.
Kathy Conley, we will be doing the 50s.
In interest of keeping my place, I've abandoned my hat. And now we're going to move into the 1950s. Exciting years for the Oxford Garden Club. Meetings still held twice a month in homes of the members who were, and I quote from the minutes, seated at tables to partake of a luncheon which was greatly enjoyed by all. Imagine getting your house ready for 35 ladies and making the lunch, as well as creating a spectacular flower arrangement that would be documented in the minutes as the one that Paul read, or this one that was a wicker basket filled with goldenrod, black-eyed Susans, white daisies, rubrum lilies, and ferns. Or the hostess's flower arrangement was candelabrans and containers with old rose candles and old rose and pink rambling roses on the dining room table, and a very pretty vase of Shasta daisies, Veronica, and Madonna lilies in the living room. During this new decade, new members were still voted on and elected for membership. Flower show was in its glory during the 50s. 800 people registered to exhibit in 1954. Dues were raised to $2 a year in 1959. Field trips were a highlight of the summer. I know Judy and Teddy and I had talked about how people, these are still pretty much the days of one-car families, and how people got to these various destinations. But obviously this train, maybe they just went places they could get to by the train. Some of the destinations visited were Jack Miner's Bird Sanctuary in Ontario, Whitechapel to see some tulips, Cranbrook Gardens, and even a tea at Meadowbrook Hall. Bit of trivia from one of the minutes of a meeting that I'd like to share with you. The meeting adjourned, whereupon our gracious hostess surprised the large group by treating each to a set of popsicles, a treat few had ever had a chance to taste. In 1953, the club joined the National Women's Farm and Garden Association. You might be familiar with this. That's what sponsors the Rochester Garden Club that has the great greens market every Christmas season. However, it apparently was not a very good fit for the Oxford Garden Club because they withdrew the next year. An annual men's night picnic was held every year at a member's home. One of the highlights of the evening was group singing, sometimes accompanied by the piano and once or twice even violins. By 1955, the petunia plantings had been replaced by a triangular garden at Mechanic and Washington. This may have been the precursor to the garden in the park. One of the meetings in 1955 featured a program on weed killer and sprays from Dow Chemical and Ortho, some products like Weed Be Gone, which is still available today, DDT, and Triax. Today we would more likely be hearing organic alternatives to these killers. In 1956, the club held its first plant, white elephant, and baked goods auction. It netted $20.20. March speaker of that year was a local minister who talked about plants and gardens of the Bible. 1958 was a big year for the club. It was the 25th anniversary. 100 invitation cards were printed for the celebration and 75 guests attended. Party agenda included prayer, invocation, student piano performances, songs, and poetry readings. The history of the club was read, and Mrs. Congdon was honored for having served 17 consecutive years as the secretary. During 1958, the Oxford Garden Club participated in the Beautify Oxford Parade with floats and members wearing garden clothes carrying garden tools. I don't know about you, I don't want to march in a parade in my garden clothes. In 1959, the Oxford Garden Club celebrated the 25th annual flower show. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, there's a poster, flower show poster there. I tried to include something from every decade, more important years. They were write-ups from the newspapers. What I found, there's the little shoebox back there that Judy Wurgis gave me to help me put this together. And it was some of the most fascinating reading I have done in quite a long time. Especially there's a little brown covered book that's maybe 3 by 5 or 3 by 6 where they documented every year things from the flower show. Who the judges were, how many entries there were, how many red ribbons, yellow ribbons, blue ribbons, honorable mentions, how many children's entries, how many senior entries, just a wealth of fun, interesting things, and lots of sort of small town trivia. So that book was updated every year into the 1960s. And now I'm going to turn it over to Ilsa to talk to you about the 1960s.
And then there were the 1960s.
There was a lot of pot involved in the 60s, right?
Not me, not me.
Okay. I graduated in the 60s, that's why I know that.
I'm going to do without the microphone. Can you all hear me? No?
Yes.
Okay, the 1960s. Those were my high school, college years. Some of us got married, 1968 for me. Some of us went to Woodstock. You know who you are. Early 60 colors were earth tones, avocado green, golden yellow, burnt orange, and browns. Carnations, chrysanthemums, lilies, gladiolas, roses, and especially daisies were sourced from the gardens and were basic selections of flower arrangements. Later, the 1960s were bold and energized with the inclusion of bright colors due to the flower power hippie movement. Women wore flowers in their hair. Now, I have a little gift for all of you. I'm not going to pass out flowers to all of you, but There are little floral notepads in here. Please pass these around, each take one. As was mentioned before, the poems that were read at the beginning of the meetings, I'm going to read the first verse of a poem that was written by Edgar Albert Guest. He was an American poet, British-born, settled in Detroit in 1891. The poem goes as such. Gardening is hardening in every way you view it. It makes a fellow hustle, and it strengthens every muscle. It knots up many a tendon so that no one can undo it. It starts his back to aching, and the man who's busy raking out the cobblestones and paving bricks is very apt to swear. Oh, gardening is hardening. It keeps wives busy pardoning the hubbies who are spilling heated language in the air. Okay, 1960, new members submitted applications and were voted on in the next meeting by ayes or nays. Attendance at meetings was 12 to 18 members. $10 was donated to Camp Oakland. After the meeting adjourned, hold on, nearly all the members visited Mrs. Hutchings' pigs.
That's what it was here.
Prize pig. Annual Men's Night potluck continues on Monday evening in August. Activities included boating, if the hostess lived on a lake, singing, and musical concerts by members. Oxford Garden Club was invited to the Lake Orion and Rochester flower shows and to the Charles Ward exhibition of table settings and flower arrangements. The program committee arranged for a program for every meeting, which included a poem to be read by a member, the flower arrangement, musical songs or piano arrangements if wanted, and information shared with the group. A speaker may be invited or member of the club give a report of a gardening interest, care of flowers or vegetables, landscaping, shrubs, trees, and etc. A minister from one of the local churches often presents a program with biblical gardens or flowers. Oftentimes, members shared photos or slides of a recent trip to areas in North America or Europe. Several times, a book review was presented. Many meetings ended in a tour of the hostess garden. Many meetings were devoted to the flower show, establishing committees, making plans, tips on flower arranging, discussing different flowers and what not to do when arranging. Flower arranging, flower arranging, flower arranging. Most meetings had tea afterwards, arranged by the tea committee, which also planned a flower arrangement, which was recorded in detail in the minutes. Field trips were planned to hidden gardens in the Irish Hills by chartered bus at $3 each. Several times, the garden club visited Jack Miner's Bird Sanctuary in Ontario. Another trip was taken by chartered bus to Frankenmuth, to Bronner's, and then lunch at Zender's. 1963, the club voted to admit new members at the meeting they applied. Plant and white elephant auctions continued at one of the May or June meetings. A nominating committee formed to recommend a state of officers for the following year. A vote was taken, 1964, a vote was taken to add 4 more meetings to the yearly calendar and passed. A white elephant sale in October, Thanksgiving program, and on December 28, a Christmas walk to visit a few decorated homes. 1965, a special meeting was held in February to determine the future meetings of the club, deciding to only have 1 meeting per month on the first Monday of the month, March through December, and having special events or outings at other times of the month. By the end of 1965, the club voted to go back to meeting every other Monday, March through November. The schedule remained in place until 1971. 1967, Oxford Garden Club held a greens market, bazaar, and bake sale, December 1 through 2. Sold were mantelpieces, wreaths, corsages, candle decorations, and bows. Profit was $167. 1968, the flower show attendance was 300 people. The topic of table settings and how to do it properly was at one meeting. 1969 was the 35th annual flower show. There were no mentions of any community gardens or flower plantings in the 1960s. $15 was donated to Camp Oakland. I got online and I Googled. There was an article in the Oxford Leader, August 24th, 1960, which reads as follows. The 26th annual Oxford Garden Club Flower Show closed Sunday evening after a most gratifying two-day experience. The many unsolicited compliments from flower lovers more than repaid the club members for their untiring energy, patience, and fortitude in bringing it to fruition. The junior high auditorium was transferred into a most colorful and artistic setting that carried one into a different world as he followed from one beautiful arrangement to another. The flower show chairman, Mrs. Josephine Skinner, had the loyal support of her club and expresses deepest appreciation to her committees and members. Also to Unger's Greenhouse for their lavish displays that actually set the theme, The Arranger. Special thanks also go to the Village of Oxford, the VFW, the Masonic Order, the Pythians, and Methodist Church for loaning tables. To Mrs. Jacobson for a beautiful arrangement, and everyone in Oxford and surrounding towns who entered flowers, fruit, and vegetables to be judged by the special judges from Lansing. Their helpful criticisms and suggestions will surely inspire many others to enter their own arrangements and our specimens to make the 1961 flower show the largest, best ever. Thank you.
So some of the things that were happening across the U.S. in the 70s is we had the first Earth Day in 1970. So the population as a whole was thinking about how we interacted with our environment. And in 1973, the Endangered Species Act was put into place in order to protect our environment. In 1975, on PBS, the Victory Garden was back. So in the 40s, there was a need for this to support the war effort, and now it became a way for everyday people to supplement their food and grow their own fruits and vegetables. And the show focused on teaching people how to do that. So closer to home, there was more changes happening to the garden club in the 70s. As our population aged as members, there were only 12 people at many meetings that were held at that time of the Oxford Garden Club. The original members were passing away. They were dealing with sicknesses and illnesses in their families, and a lot of the minutes talked about honoring our deceased members and plantings done in the honor of those people. There was also a shift in the way meetings were held. It was decided that the opening meeting for the year would not start until April because many people were going to Florida. And then they decided that they would meet into the month of November. Meeting topics also continued to change. So there were things about subjects like conservation, conserving water, conserving electricity. There was discussion about DDT actually becoming prohibited at that time and safe alternatives to chemicals and other things introduced into the environment. There was talk about organic gardening became a popular topic, and a discussion of pollution and our role of how we contributed to that. And they also talked, because of the inflation at that time, more people were growing vegetable gardens, so there was a lot of talk about vegetable gardening due to soaring food prices. They also had demonstrations on other things. Of course, flower arranging continued to be a subject, and people still got feedback on their flower arrangements, do's and don'ts. But there were also things like discussions on how to plant a terrarium, which is a brand new subject at that time. Another new emerging garden trend was hanging baskets, and that was a very popular topic to learn about. Crafts included apple doll heads, corsages, and that was the decade of the bicentennial, so members sewed aprons and bonnets that were going to be coming up for bicentennial celebration items. They also had people perform music, club members, and also singing, and everybody joined in to sing songs. There were, they talked about rules for flower arranging. Those were still provided for people. I'm not sure if we ever have copies of that, but that was also still a subject that went on. Field trips were to other places that we'd heard about, including Cranbrook Gardens, Frankenmuth. This was referred to as Mrs. Wilson's Mansion, which we call Meadowbrook today. Also, they went to Fairlane. They went to a mystery trip in Jackson Park in Windsor, and also to Belle Isle. And at that time, the cost of a bus ride and a box lunch was $4. Still in Oxford, the men's picnic continued, and rather than people fixing food, they got for one meal, it was newly available Kentucky Fried Chicken was on the menu. The Oxford Garden Club participated in the Garden Parade, the Oxford Gravel Parade, and they also continued with their plant sales and white elephant sales. In the 1970s, Oxford saw the grand opening of the Northeast Oakland Historical Museum in the Oxford Bank Building, and volunteers contributed flowers for each day of the opening events. But as the 70s moved on, there were fewer and fewer members, and the flower shows dropped off in popularity. In the 70s, early 70s, 350 people attended. By 1978, only 35 people attended, including members. So given how much work was involved and the lack of volunteers to help them put on the shows, after 37 years, in 1978, the flower shows were dropped. In other club changes, as membership dropped off as well, they no longer voted members in or out. If a member applied, they were accepted for membership in the club. They also moved on back to only one meeting per month, and continued to struggle with actually an issue we have today, which is finding a location for the meetings. And at that time, they started meeting in the Oxford Library, and they did a long stint of meeting at the library at that time. And that's also when the tradition of purchasing a book for a deceased member started, when they started working with the Oxford Garden Club. At that point, too, they also decided that they would move to officers would hold a 2-term membership in order to provide continuity to the club. But as they exited the 70s, there was concern about how the garden club would continue. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carol, and she'll talk about the 80s.
I joined the garden club in 1986. My friend and neighbor, Juanita Kay, was a member for many years and invited me to a meeting. At that time, you still had to be approved by the members. So after being a guest at a few meetings, I asked to join, and luckily I was approved. Roll call. Roll call was answered with the theme of the meeting, like everyone said, such as your favorite flower, garden plans for that year, a garden you toured, etc. Most meetings were held at members' homes or library. If it was your home, you were responsible for the program and the refreshments. A good number of programs were very interesting. One I gave was making rose petal tea bags from roses I had dried. Roll call was also called by your married name, such as Mrs. Ken Rogas, and printed in the booklet that way. And the newer members they wanted their own name. So eventually, we voted to call you by your given first name. Some of the older members were upset by that, saying it wasn't proper. They gradually got over it. And when I joined, only officers were present at the planning meetings. If you had something you wanted to suggest, you could let them know. The vice president was responsible for the booklets. Each month had to have a poem or saying relating to that month of the year. Then you had to type them up with copies, no computers or printers, and collate them and make them into booklets. It was a big job. The membership fell off during the 80s and early 90s. Some meetings only had 6 or 7 ladies attend. Some of the older members were passing away or too infirm to attend. And I think the younger women were not able to join because of the daytime hours after the meetings. Many of them had small children at home. Membership picked up when more families were building homes and moving to the Oxford area. At one point, we were almost at a quota of 50 members. We had 2 ladies who were very competitive at the plant sale. Each one thought her plants were nicer and better looking than the others. And they were not afraid to voice their opinions. One brought a yucca plant and was told, "What a yucky yucca you brought." The club used to make Christmas stockings of red net that were filled and taken to shut-ins. Also, we used to take to Lake Orion Nursing Home. And our July picnic was called Men's Night. Everyone brought their husbands. No alcoholic beverages were allowed. When the rules were later relaxed, more men came. When you hosted a picnic, you were to have a little program of some kind. But most members just took them on a tour of their garden. We started making donations to Fish, Seven Ponds, Oxford Beautification Projects, Camp Open's horticultural program. And we had field trips to Windsor Peace Garden, Sarnia Rose Gardens, and Davisburg Bonsai Garden. I don't know if that's still there. It's not too far from here. It was like in somebody's yard. Some Oriental people are, way down and all this. You didn't talk to them, you just went and toured their garden. At one time, we had a lady from England join our club, very knowledgeable about gardening, and had lots to share. Came for a few months and left. She told someone a few people said things to her that made her feel very unwelcome. So glad we are not a club like that now. Come one, come all. Here's to 100 years. Thank you.
Is this on?
Well, for me, this is a wonderful occasion, 90 years. You guys are just amazing, and I can't believe Judy has been our president for so long. Thank you so much for your dedication, and it's great. And we're so glad to have Sue Bizzardi here, because in 1992, she met with the girls and planned the Centennial Park in downtown Oxford, and we took on the responsibility of one garden there. And so many of us go down there on Mondays, or once or twice a month, or when they're through town, and fix it up. And it's really beautiful. It's wonderful to see. And we were kind of civic minded, at this time. And so we donated to 7 ponds. The children's garden at MSU, and we have a brick there in our name. And the Oxford Library fireplace, we have a plaque there with our name on it. We're leaving our name everywhere.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. And then we've donated to Camp Oakland, the Polly Ann Trail, and we had wonderful programs. A lot of you remember Judy Cornelia and Jana Makunovich, and we took trips to 7 Ponds, and we are now a member of 7 Ponds, so we can go there whenever we want. And the Grand Oak Herb Farm. A lot of the places we went years ago we're revisiting again, and some of them are still there, so it's really wonderful. And in the 90s, the dues were $5. Now they're $20. But that's it. And now we have, over the years, we have cultivated at least 6 master gardeners and inactive master gardeners, maybe more now. And we have one with a degree in landscape horticulture. So, we have a lot of knowledge in our club, not only just from things we've learned over the years. In the 90s, the meetings were held at the Oxford United Methodist Church and the Oxford Library and members' homes. So you can see things have changed considerably, but they've stayed the same a lot. We've continued on with a lot of traditions, and at that time in the 90s, attendance was between 17 and 22 members. So you can see it ebbs and flows, but thank you for sharing the Oxford Garden Come with me, because I've loved it all these years. Thank you.
Well, I, for one, have learned some things. I did not know that we had a plaque on the library fireplace. I did not know that. And a few other things. So it looks like from your rapt faces here, everybody's really enjoying this, and that's pleasing, because we didn't know how we would be received. But I have the last one, so be thankful for that. So anyway, but I go from 2000 to 2023, and that's a lot of years. So we began 2000 by surviving the Y2K bug. And I don't know how many of you bought generators, but there was a lot of generator sales that just went crazy, because we were so fearful of changing over from 1999 to 2000. We thought that there was going to be a computer glitch, among many other things. Well, nothing happened. We survived it all. So we were glad for that. So I found out the club was having plant auctions and silent auctions in 2000. I was not a member of at that time, but I didn't know we were having silent auctions. I thought we got that up all by ourselves, but we didn't. So John Hitch was a member of the garden club along with his wife at that time, and he was also garden and park manager. And there were not very many people helping him out that time. So one of the work days in the park, he went to work, and lo and behold, he found a lady with scissors picking flowers out of our garden to take home to her garden. Well, I don't think he publicized that enough, because that's not what our garden's for. So we all kind of got a laugh about that, but John Hitch was the only one that saw her do that. So the garden club also purchased benches for the park, because the park became a nice park where we were volunteering in 2092. So we were responsible for getting benches in the park. And finally, they wore out because the park was used so much. So when they were finished being in the park, we donated them to Crossroads for Youth, which was certainly a very worthwhile organization. And the metal ones were purchased by the village, and that's what is there today. And then there was a cookbook somewhere in the 2000s that was supposed to be written. All the members that wanted to submitted something for the cookbook. And Melissa Meisner, who was a longtime member, decided that she would type everything up. So she did a fine job typing it all up, and then her computer crashed. There was no backup, everything was lost. So that was the end of the cookbook. And we were sorry, I did not know anything about that when I was researching it, trying to get a copy of the cookbook. That's when I found out what happened. And then Jan Burns, I want to talk about you. You taught how to make raspberry liqueur and vanilla extract, and I was not in the club then. So I don't know if you did a demonstration or what, but I like that. I don't know where I was, but I like that. So 2006, the meetings regularly started at the library, and 2 Christmases, now get this, 2 Christmas parties were held at the Royal Park Hotel in Rochester. I don't know what happened, but we're not going there anymore. It's probably too expensive, but anyway, that was great. So 2009, there was a redesign of the garden that started because there was a building torn down. I don't remember everything that was in that building, but at the very back, where I think it was Parkside Dairy, was at the back. But the whole building was torn down, and they built the present building from 24 all the way back to the parking lot. And I remember they encroached 6 inches into our garden with the sidewalk. Thank you, Alta. And I remember, and some other people that I told about this remember that. So we had to do a garden redesign because 6 inches of our garden were gone. They accidentally took it. They were fine, but anyway, that's when we did the redesign of the garden. And it took us quite a while to complete it because it was a big task. We had shrubs that were dug out in the middle, and we really had to do a lot of work. But in 2010, it was completed, which it took a year and a half to do. And we had so many people in the garden club contribute plants to the garden, heirloom plants, and every hosta that is in our garden was contributed by a member, and they were only variegated hostas. So many of you, I don't know who you are, but we thank you for that. I cannot compete with the pigs, but I'm going to try on this one. We had 5 yards of compost delivered. We didn't do mulch at that time. We had 5 yards of compost delivered. So we put tarps down between the garden and M24, and Jeff Acton is the one that delivered the compost. He dumped it on the tarps. We had no idea what 5 yards of compost or mulch compost looked like. Well, our garden was so thick with compost, we could not get rid of it all. We had 2 yards left. We didn't know what to do, so we were flagging people down in cars, walking in the parking lot in the back, get a bucket, get something. We had to get rid of this and clean up. And I remember there was one lady that worked at the Ox. She was bringing cardboard boxes out, filling them up. She couldn't pick them up. She had to get guys from the restaurant to come out and drag them to her car. So 2 yards of mulch was gotten rid of that way, and then we could at least clean up the tarps and get out of there. But that's my competition for the pigs. In 2013, we had the first craft project that we invited members to do. And that craft project was the mosaic flag that's over there on the table. And Sue Nassar taught that, and that was a great class, very well received. And this was done, I don't think it was done in the winter, but that's when we thought, wintertime is a good time to do a craft because we weren't having regular meetings then. So we've done that to this day. And then Jan Burns designed the logo for the Garden Club, and we have 2 jackets over there with the Oxford Garden Club logo on it. They're beautiful, and many of you have t-shirts that have that logo on. Somebody did a tote, but that's a very nice logo, and a local embroidery company that Jan worked at did the embroidery for us on that. And also that year we planted 100 bulbs, daffodil bulbs, in the garden. 2014, Wojo's gave us 10% off on our first, I don't know what you call it, our first buying event there, where the member, if you bought and mentioned the Oxford Garden Club, the club received 10% of the whatever we purchased. That was 2014. And also, that was the first year we had pictures of everybody in the directory. That was a new thing for us. 2015, we voted to email the minutes to the members. That was something very new. Most of you had computers at that time, and those of you that didn't, the minutes were printed out and they were mailed. So that was new. 2016, we did our first nursery crawl, and we all know Jeanette's famous for that, so I won't tell that story again. We started meeting at Independence Village, which was free of charge for us. They invited us to do that, I think because we're old and they thought we might be prospective homeowners there or whatever. 2017, we voted to stagger the officers of President, Secretary, and Vice President and Treasurer, which has worked out well for the club because we don't have all new officers in 1 year. Seven Ponds was also a big part of the Oxford Garden Club for many years, and Mike Champagne spoke to the Garden Club for 25 years. I never knew that. And then he retired, and he will be missed for sure. Honorary members were also listed in our directory for the first time in 2017 well, we didn't have a column for that. 2018, we found out that the Garden Club was not an official 501(c) organization. We always thought we were, but we were not. And we held the first silent auction. I found out it was not our first silent auction. They had it many times in years past, but it was the first one for us. And Linda spoiled us because she did a spreadsheet for us. Oh my God, we thought, died and went to heaven when we saw that, because we never knew when we were going to get our directory. It didn't only depend on us, it depended on the printer. And that spreadsheet was invaluable to us because it was just a guide of what we were going to do for the year, so we really appreciate that. 2019, we voted to pass, to spend $50 for the hostesses for the Christmas luncheon only. So they had that money to do with whatever they wanted to, whether it was decorations of prizes or whatever. And also that year, we voted for February and March to be meeting months, so we could do whatever we wanted to. And we maintained a craft for one of those months. And to this day, we're still doing that, and we've done lovely crafts over the years, and everybody calls and wants more, so I think we're going to continue that. And Oxford Parks and Rec added our information to their brochure that year. And also October of 2019 was the first time we had a meeting at the Oxford Parks and Rec Senior Center. We voted to try that for 1 year to see how it worked. And boy, we're still there, and we're so happy because the parking's wonderful. They do so much to help us, so that has worked out well. The kitchen is fantastic. That year, we also went to Proven Winners in Carlton, which was a wonderful trip. We've tried to plan that for 2 years. We're unable to do it. Finally, we did that, and there was a wonderful turnout for that. November was the harvest shearing meeting, and it was attended by 20 members. And that's another time that we had a snowfall, and we had a silent auction. That was the first one, I think, that we had. And we had like 8 inches of snow again. People showed up. Amazing. So 2020, we planted that beautiful hydrangea tree in the garden, and it's just flourishing. And also that year, Teddy found out about a butterfly grant, and she applied for it, and we received the grant, planted the necessary plants in the garden, and also added a bird bath and a butterfly puddler, which are beautiful additions. Also, plant markers were added, something that we talked about for a long time. Also, there is a box attached to the fence in the park that advertises the Oxford Garden Club. We've gotten new members from that, from Oxford Parks and Rec and their brochure, and also from the website that the village maintains for us. You can also look up the garden club. So we've gotten new members from various things. Also, we planted a maple tree in the Oxford Township Park, and there's a Christmas wreath that is added to the garden every year for about the last 3 years. 20 and 21 saw COVID hit us really hard, and we had to cancel a lot of our events that were already planned. So with the intention of, when we finally got past COVID, we would try and schedule some of these events at a later date. So that worked out well for us. In 2021, we were finally back to a somewhat normal year. We had a wonderful picnic with lots of visiting and wonderful food. And Smith Silo was open for a presentation by Glenn Pace, who had a wonderful garden that we visited. And he did a presentation for us in Smith Silo, so we were able to spread out and keep safe. Joanne Nelson offered her home and garden of daffodils. Many of us went and saw that. And the garden crawl was a success that year. Instead of going to a restaurant, we did a brown bag lunch, which worked out pretty well. And this is just an FYI note. If anybody lives in Oxford, the township is providing mosquito donuts. If you don't know what they are, they're safe for birds, fish, everything. If you live in Oxford, you can go to the township, give your name and address, and they will give you mosquito donuts free. I've been doing this for years. It's well worth it if you have any standing water. This is for Oxford residents only. And you must sign and leave your address. 2022, January started with a good turnout for a planning meeting. Some new events and others that were canceled, we were able to reschedule. The craft in March was a sun catcher. That's on display over there. Our greenhouse crawl will be for 5 nurseries. Boy, did we roll our eyes when we heard that. But it was fabulous, Elizabeth. We had within 5 greenhouses within 6 miles. That does not happen. But it was just wonderful. And I think 4 of the businesses gave us 10% discount. And it was just outstanding. And we were finally able to go to Grand Oaks Herb Farm, which we had visited many years before, but that was also something that we had to cancel for 2 years. So we really enjoyed that. And Jan and Roy had the picnic last year, and that's when Judy, our current president, asked for volunteers for this party. Within 5 minutes, she had 6 volunteers. And that's where we are right now. So we're almost back to normal. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed the trip down memory lane and all the history that happened in this garden club and in Oxford. I found it fascinating as I was reading all the minutes. So I hope you were paying attention if you filled out your quiz, and I hope you filled it out before we started our presentations, because I'm going to read the answers now, or you can tell me what the answers were. So how much were the dues in 1935? 33, 50 cents. Okay, give yourself a point for that one. Where and when did the club meet?
In the members' homes.
Members' homes, and how often?
Twice a month.
Twice a month. How many members did the club begin with?
25.
These were the easy ones, weren't they? Name 2 Oxford parades that the Oxford Garden Club entered with a float and or marchers.
Homecoming.
And the Oxford Garden Parade.
Gravel parade. It was the gravel parade. And then there was one more, the beautification parade. They had a big year of Beautify Oxford. So if you've got 2 of those right, you can give yourself a point. What flower was the Oxford flower with planted beds maintained along Washington Street? Petunias. And members signed up to maintain a certain area, so that was their area to maintain all summer. When was the first plant auction?
50s.
In the 50s. Anybody have a year? 56. Yep. Did you get that before we gave the presentation or after? When did Oxford Garden the club begin maintaining the garden in Centennial Park?
76.
No?
92.
92.
92. Centennial Park.
Now, if you really wrote your answers before we started the presentation, and you're between 2 years of 92, you can count it. 90 to 94. How many years did the Oxford Garden Club sponsor a flower show? 37 years, and what was the largest attendance?
800,000.
1,000, yeah. So probably a bit more. In the 1950s, the hostess surprised the group by serving popsicles. Wasn't that a surprise? I've been asking people, and most people guessed Jell-O. So popsicles. And in 1960, after the meeting was adjourned, they all went to see Mrs. Hutchinson's prized pigs. So if you legitimately made your answers before the presentation, how many of you got 8 right? 7. Now there's 2 answers for 8, and there's 2 answers for 2. So there's a total of 12 possible. How about 6? Kathy got 6. Anybody else get 6 answers right? Okay, Kathy. And then how about 5? I thought this was going to be kind of hard. So, okay, Kathy, you get one of these donated. Where'd it go? Oh, one of these donated jelly or barbecue sauce from Fogler's, and we're going to raffle the other one off. Okay, so it was one of the things that I learned. I thought, all we have to do in the garden club is work in the garden once a month or once a year. Look at all the work that they did with the flower shows and everything else. And I felt like we were a little bit slouchers. But in the beginning, it was a social club. And now we're really gardeners who love flowers and love seeing gardens and gardening ourselves. So anyway, it was a great trip down history.